This is a demonstration of the development of the forerunner requirement to MIL-STD-461 CS02, long obsolete now, 20 years, but this is the how and why of how that requirement came to pass. Radio receivers back in the World War II era, such as this BC348Q, were very susceptible to ripple on their power input, and the CS02 forerunner requirement was installed to ensure that newer radios had more immunity to that kind of ripple. So in this case, the BC348Q could be tuned from 150 kHz to 18 megahertz, with the exception of the AM broadcast band. Normally the operator would listen to the radio using the headset. For the purposes of the demo, we have a speaker attached as well. And the BC348Q was powered by aircraft 28 volts DC, which is applied in the lab here through a 5 microhenry period piece Listen. And you can see that the 5 microhenry Listen is connected to the output of the RF signal generator, which is set to 8 megahertz, which is what the BC348Q is tuned to. So we are injecting ripple into the Listen rather than reading ripple off of the Listen. And this is in fact how the original requirement was performed back when they first came up with it. Now, it's time here. We're going to go ahead and turn the RF on out of the signal generator. It should be noted that the signal generator has 1 kilohertz modulation at 90% imposed on the 8 megahertz carrier. It is the 1 kilohertz modulation that we will be listening for when we apply the RF signal. Okay. Clearly we can hear that we're susceptible at 40 dB above a microvolt into the applied to the 28 volt DC into the BC348Q. Now keep in mind that the CS02 limit at the point it became obsolete was 1 volt, which is a full 80 dB above this level. So you can see indeed that this thing was very susceptible. The first forerunner CS02 requirement was applied at a level of 1 millivolt, 60 dB microvolt, so about 20 dB less, or 20 dB above the level or the threshold of susceptibility that we are measuring here. However, note, if you look closely, that the antenna lead wire coming out of the BC348Q routes very close to the power coming out of the Listen. And if you look very closely here, a salient characteristic of this class of radios was they did not have a coaxial input. They had a single wire running above ground. You can see the ground there, denoted G, actually runs to ground. The antenna wire runs as a single wire above ground, covered with steatite beads and suspended 5 centimeters above ground by the porcelain standoffs. That more than likely is the reason for the 5 centimeters that we have today in the requirement. Furthermore, the fact that we've run this thing parallel here and very, very close is likely a cause of the low threshold susceptibility. In other words, we're actually getting into the front end, not through the power supply. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to carefully reach in and pull the power away from the antenna, and we're going to listen for what happens as we pull that away. Okay. Just that much was almost completely eliminated what we're hearing here. And if you'll notice, I pulled that, you could probably call that about 2 inches away. And if you'll recall that we have the requirement to separate different wires that are run together in the test setup by at least 2 inches. So there you go. Okay. Now, let's see what the front end or the power input filtering looks like, or the power filtering threshold of susceptibility looks like, when we're completely going to eliminate coupling through the antenna, where I'm going to simply disconnect at the antenna terminal altogether. Okay, clearly now we hear nothing at all, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and up the injected level until I hear about the same level again. That's a little high. That's probably about where we were at before, and now we can see that we're at 60 dB microvolts, which was that target limit, and still about 60 dB below where we finally ended up with CS02 when it became obsolete. So that's just a little bit about how the forerunner to CS02 came about, the how and why, and what drove it. Thank you very much.